I've looked at thousands of pitch decks, and I can tell you 95% of founders are making the same mistake. They think the job of the pitch deck is to convince an investor to invest. It's not. The job of your pitch deck is actually to get you to the next conversation. That's it. Because nobody is wiring you $500,000 because they love slide 7. Your deck has one job. Make the investor interested enough that they want to know more. And this is where founders get themselves into trouble. They try to put everything into the deck. Every feature, every market statistic, every product screenshot, every projection, everything possible they think an investor might want to know. And what happens? Well, the deck gets longer. The slides, well, they get busier. The font gets really tiny. And the story gets worse. I've seen 25 slide decks. I've seen 30 slide decks. I've seen slides with so much text on them that I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to invest in the company or read a novel. Your investor shouldn't have to work that hard. A great pitch deck is usually somewhere around 10 to 14 slides. It tells me a story. What's the problem you're solving? Why does it matter? What did you actually build? Why is this different? Is anyone actually using it? Why are you the team to build this? And where can this business go? That's what I need to know. And here's the part founders really need to understand. Your deck does not need to answer every question. A great deck should actually create questions, because questions lead to conversations, and conversations lead to diligence, and diligence is where eventually leads to checks. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what I think most startup pitch decks get wrong, what investors are actually looking for, and how to build a deck that makes an investor say, I want to talk to this founder, because that's the win, not the check. Here's the first thing I want every founder to understand about a pitch deck. Your deck has one job. Get the meeting. That's it. Founders get into trouble because they try to make the deck do way too much. They want it to explain the entire company. They want to answer every possible investor question. They want to prove how smart they are. And they want to eliminate every objection before the investor even has one. Stop doing that. Think of how an investor is actually going to experience your deck. They might get it from another investor. It may show up in their inbox. Somebody might forward to them with one sentence, hey, you should take a look at this company. And now you maybe have 2 or 3 minutes to grab their attention. That's your entire window. So every single slide needs to earn the next slide. That's how I want you to think about your deck. Slide 1 gets me to slide 2. Slide 2 gets me to slide 3. And somewhere along the way, I start thinking, okay, this is interesting. That's the goal. You don't need me to understand every detail of your business. You need me to understand enough of the business, so I want to understand the rest. That's a huge difference. I tell founders this all the time. Confusion kills deals. If I have to read a slide 3 times to figure out what you do, you've already lost me. If I'm staring at 8 different charts trying to figure out which numbers matter, you've lost me. If I get to slide 6 and I still can't explain your company in one sentence, you have definitely lost me. Simplicity wins. Clear wins. Interesting wins. Your pitch deck is not the diligence process. It's the invitation to the diligence process. So when you're building your pitch deck, stop asking, what else can I put in here? And start asking, what can I take out and still make somebody want the meeting? That change alone will make most pitch decks dramatically better. And once you understand that, we can talk about the next mistake founders make. They start telling the story in the wrong place. One of the biggest mistakes I see founders make in their pitch decks is they fall in love with their product. I totally get it. You've probably spent the last year of your life building this thing. You've obsessed over every feature. You know exactly how the technology works. So, when you get in front of an investor, you immediately start talking about the product. Here's the problem. The investor doesn't care yet. Before I can care about your solution, you actually have to make me care about the problem. And this is where a lot of pitch decks completely miss the boat. They have a problem slide with 3 bullets and some gigantic statistic like, this is a $50 billion industry. Okay, that doesn't tell me there's a problem. I want to understand who actually has this problem. How painful's the problem? How often does it happen? And what are they doing today to try to solve this problem? And most importantly, is this problem painful enough that somebody is actually willing to pay you to make it go away? Because there's a huge difference between a problem people have and a problem people are willing to pay to solve. That's the Pound founders actually miss. Your job isn't to convince me your product is cool. Your job is to make the problem so obvious that when you finally show me the solution, I'm already thinking, of course somebody needs to build this. That's when your solution becomes powerful. So when you build your deck, resist the urge to rush right to the product. Make me feel the problem first. Because if I don't believe the problem, I'm never going to believe the business. Now, once you've convinced me the problem's real, now you get to show me the solution. And this is where founders make another huge mistake. They overcomplicate it. I see solution slides with diagrams, arrows, screenshots, 7 different features, technical terminology. And the founder's explaining all of it because they think the complexity makes the company sound impressive. It actually does the exact opposite. If I'm an investor and I can't explain what your company does after hearing you pitch, you definitely have a problem. Because remember what happens after your meeting with me. I might go talk to one of my partners. I might mention your company to another investor. I might actually introduce you to someone in my network. And you're probably not going to be standing right next to me when I do it. So I need to be able to explain your company without you in the room. That means your solution needs to pass what I like to call the repeatability test. Can I explain what you do to someone else in 1 or 2 sentences? Not how every feature works, not your entire technology stack, just what do you do? Who do you do it for? And why is this better than what they're doing today? If I can repeat that, you definitely have something. If I need to pull your deck back up just to remember what the hell your company does, you've already lost me. Founders sometimes think investors need to understand everything. We absolutely don't. We need to understand enough to want to know more. That's a huge difference. Your pitch deck isn't supposed to answer every question. It's supposed to create the next question. So, simplify the solution, make it easy to understand, make it easy to remember, and most importantly, make it easy for someone else to repeat. Because the best pitch decks doesn't just work when you're in the room. It keeps working after you leave. Now we get to one of the most important parts of your pitch deck, traction. And this is where I want founders to understand something that's really simple. Investors, we hear promises all day long. We are going to disrupt this industry. We're going to be the market leader. We're going to get to, wait for it, $100 million in revenue. Great! So are the other 15 founders I talked to this week. What separates you isn't what you say you're going to do. It's what you can show me you've already done. That's traction. And traction always doesn't have to mean millions of dollars of revenue, especially if you're early. Maybe you went from 10 customers to 50 customers in 3 months. Maybe your revenue is growing 20% month over month. Maybe customers, they're coming back. Maybe your users are engaging with the product every single week. Maybe you launched a pilot with a company everybody recognizes. Maybe you've got a wait list of 5,000 people. The actual metric, it really depends upon your business. But here's what I'm looking for. Evidence that the market is starting to pull the product right out of your hands. Because anybody can build a spreadsheet that goes up and to the right. And trust me, I've seen some unbelievable spreadsheets. Year 1, $500,000. Year 2, $5 million. Year 3, somehow you're doing $50 million. Okay, show me why I should believe this now. That's what traction does. Traction takes your pitch from, here's what I think could happen, and turns it into, here's what's already happening. And that's a completely different conversation with an investor. So don't bury your best numbers on slide 14. If you've got traction, put it at front and center. Make the numbers really easy to understand. And don't give me 17 different metrics because you think more numbers are better. Give me the 2 or 3 that make me want to lean forward. Because investors don't fund spreadsheets. We fund evidence. And the more evidence you can give me that customers are actually what you want, you're building, the less you're asking me to take your word for it. Let's talk about the market slide, because this is where I see founders put some absolutely enormous numbers in a pitch deck, thinking they've done their job. The global market is $100 billion. Okay, that sounds impressive. But here's my question. How much of that market can you actually reach? Because you're probably not selling to everybody on earth. And this is where the TAM, SAM, and SOM get thrown out of pitch decks without founders really thinking about what those numbers really mean. I don't need you to convince me that you're operating in a gigantic industry. I need you to convince me that there's a big enough market for this to become a really viable company. And those are two different things. Let's say you're building software for restaurants. Tell me the global restaurant industry is worth trillions of dollars doesn't tell me anything. You're not selling food. You're selling software to a specific type of restaurant at a specific price. So show me the market. How many potential customers are there? What could you realistically charge them for your product or service? And what happens if you capture even a small percentage of the market? Now we're having an interesting conversation. And here's another thing. Don't manipulate the numbers just because you think investors want to see a billion-dollar market. We can tell. I'd rather see a smaller market calculation that I actually believe than a $200 million or billion-dollar TAM after a few questions. Because remember, every number in your pitch deck is a credibility test. If I start questioning one number, I start questioning the rest of them. So make your market slide simple. Make the assumptions clear, and make the math something an investor can understand in about 30 seconds. You don't need the biggest number. You need the most believable number, because a great market slide doesn't make me say, wow, that's a huge market. It makes me say, I can see how this becomes a really big company. Now we get to the part of the pitch deck where you actually ask for the money. And I can't tell you how many decks I've seen that end just like this. We're raising $2 million. Great. Why? What does $2 million actually do? And please don't just give me a pie chart that says 40% on product, 30% on sales and marketing, 20% on hiring, 10% on operations. That doesn't tell me anything. What I'm looking for at your raise, I'm thinking about milestones. Where's the company today? Where does this capital get you tomorrow? And what should the company look like 18 to 24 months from now if you execute? Maybe $2 million gets you from $500,000 in ARR to $3 million. Maybe it gets you from 20 customers to 150. Maybe it gets you through a major product launch. Maybe it gets you into 3 new markets. Whatever those milestones are, I want you to understand them. Because if investors aren't really investing in your current company, we're investing in what you believe this company can become. And your raise should create a bridge between those two things. Here's where we are today. Here's the capital we're raising. Here's what we're going to do with it. And here's what we expect to be when the capital's been deployed. That's a much more powerful story. We need $2 million because what other seed stage companies are raising. And there's another question you should be able to answer. Why this amount? Why not $1 million? Why not $5 million? There should be some logic behind your number, because the amount you're raising shouldn't be based on what sounds impressive. It should be based on what it costs to hit the next set of meaningful milestones. That's what investors want to understand. So don't just tell me how much you're raising. Show me what the money unlocks. Because investors don't fund a dollar amount. They fund what the dollar amount can accomplish. So, let me leave you with this. Your pitch deck isn't going to raise your round. You are. The deck has one simple job. Get the investor interested enough to have the next conversation. That's it. It doesn't need to answer every single question. It doesn't need to be 30 slides. And it definitely doesn't need to prove how smart you are. It needs to tell a simple, believable story. Here's the problem. Here's why our solution matters. Here's the evidence that people actually want it. Here's how big this could become. Here's what we're raising. And here's what that capital allows us to accomplish. If an investor can understand those quickly, you've done your job. I've looked at thousands of pitch decks over the years. And the biggest mistake I see founders make isn't that they're missing some magical slide. It's that they're trying to say way too much. Remember this, clarity creates curiosity, and curiosity gets you the next meeting. Your goal isn't to make an investor understand everything your company does in 15 minutes. Your goal is to make them want another 30 minutes with you. So, simplify the story, make every slide earn its place, and build a deck that starts a conversation instead of trying to finish one, because that's what a great pitch deck actually does. If you're building your deck right now, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep breaking down exactly what I see from founders, what investors are actually looking for, and how you can put yourself in a better position to raise capital. I'll see you in the next one.